for ArtServe Michigan. And ArtServe Michigan is the intermediary that runs the professional development program for the Kresge Artist Fellows. So we are pleased to have with us today the 2011 Kresge Artist Fellows for their final professional practice meeting. So if you are a 2011 Kresge Artist Fellow, can you raise your hand and say hello? Hello, I see you. That means you laid this well in the back. Calling you out. And we also are happy to have with us some amazing alumni that have continued to be part of our program and engage with our current fellows, as well as provide a lasting legacy for the program. So can I acknowledge our 2009 Visual Artist Fellows that are here as well? Hey! They have been instrumental in helping us come up with new ideas and new approaches to our work, and we've been really grateful that we have this ongoing community of fellows within Detroit that we can acknowledge and work with throughout the years. So it's my pleasure to invite you to Curating now. As I said, this is our final session with the Kresge Artist Fellows. And I just want to say a little bit about how wonderful it is in our community to have a foundation really step forward and commit to actually honoring and respecting the lives and careers of artists. First, through honoring them with $25,000 in recognition of their work to date, but then going much further and much deeper into what it takes to be a creative practitioner in this day and age, by actually recognizing that professional development is a way of actually helping them realize future ambitions, allowing them time to dream and the space to network with colleagues and peers, both within their region as well as nationally and internationally. So I'm very pleased that we have a foundation like that in our community and happy to be the intermediary for that work. The other component of this program, as many of you know, and as a lot of you experienced last year, was ArtX Detroit, which is a community-wide celebration of the ingenuity of not just our artists, but of our institutions who are regularly engaged in supporting their work. And at that point, I cannot say enough about how instrumental the Detroit Institute of Arts has been, and particularly curator Rebecca Hart, who's Associate Curator for Contemporary Art in the Department of the James Duffy Pearson Department of Contemporary Art. So woo-hoo to Becky. She's been a mother to many of us, a champion for all of us, and we really should give her respect for the tremendous amount of dedication she's brought to the work into this community. So without saying too much more, I would also like to acknowledge our partners on the program, the Kresge Arts in Detroit office at CCS, who are always engaged in selecting amazing groups of fellows, who are currently doing tons of work actually on our new cohort of performing and literary artists. And also our partners at Midtown Detroit Inc., who kind of stepped fearlessly into the void to produce a community-wide showcase called ArtX Detroit. So without further ado, I'm going to let Becky guide us through the rest of the day, but I just want to say thank you very much, and I also want to say thank you to our presenters who've traveled to become part of our family, and we're going to keep as part of our family. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Cezanne. And just a little like, I remember a royal wedding recently where the names were messed up. This is the James Pearson Duffy Department of Contemporary Art. Yes. But thank you and welcome. It is such a pleasure to have the sort of curatorial heft that we have in this room today. People have come from around the world, and they represent the corners of the world. And I think that that's very important today as we think about how curation is practiced, but also as we think about how there's so many artists in the room and how our studio practices develop in relationship to curators. You know, there are times that I'm working with an artist and they're working away and we're rushing to a show, and I write my statement and they say, yeah, that is what I'm doing. And so there's this wonderful, intimate relationship between curators and artists that is so important. Today, as we talk about curation now, we're going to look at some trends, and I'm going to ask a few questions of the curators too. One of which, there's a lot of discussion about what is, where is an individual's curatorial compass? Where do they set it? What are its axes? How do they judge it? And how does that develop in relationship to studio practice? The other question that I hope that we talk a little bit about is how location influences what is made and how it's presented. Which I know is a bit self-serving. I haven't told you all about that, except that we have people hailing from Singapore, Glasgow, Liverpool, the United States, shall I say? And who have I forgotten? In Istanbul, yes. Cezanne was very good to write out some bios, and I'd like to welcome our speakers. I'm not going to talk too much about individual speakers because you can see their credentials on paper. Michael Stubbs comes to us from Liverpool. He is engaged in an alternative curatorial practice. He is the director of a public space and of a foundation for art and creative technology. Alison is our newest she's now a transplant to Michigan, and she is the new curator at the Eli Broad Museum at Michigan State University. So we're thrilled to have her on her maiden voyage to Detroit. And then Gunalan, Guna, I'm sorry, who hails from Singapore, but is the newly appointed Dean of Art and Design at University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Kitty Anderson, who's here from Glasgow, and is the curator at Common Guild. And finally, Basak Senova, who is here from Istanbul. And I think as you read these credentials, you're going to find that the people here have organized national pavilions at major biennales. They have advised biennales, been part of other curatorial and scientific teams. So we're going to hear from some of the best in the world. And I'm just thrilled to be able to present today's panel to you. Just a word on format. Each talk is about 20 minutes long. And there will be refreshments. We'll have breaks after the first 3 talks. And so it's my pleasure to welcome Michael Stubbs to the podium.
Now today I'm going to speak as a bureaucrat, as a curator, and as an artist. So I'm a kind of school failure. Somehow I managed to get a professorship. I was actually jointly appointed. So I was really into cars and motorbikes as a kid. Didn't pay enough attention at school. And that's one of the main reasons I'm really interested in Detroit, because of cars. So I've always known about Detroit for all the wrong reasons. Now this presentation is called Turning Fact Inside Out, and right now what I'm doing is making a new business plan for FACT, the Foundation for Art and Creative Technology, which is Britain's media art centre. And really we're going through some pretty significant changes in Europe, in Britain. Largely, the credit crunch in 2007 has had significant impact on the public purse. The capital reserves of the country, the banking system, the legal and governmental systems are rocking in the wrong way, in a bad way. And likewise, that's impacted onto public expenditure. Hospitals, schools, culture is all at threat, and it's meant that everyone's had to do a lot of rethinking. But FACT is in Liverpool, not in London, and because it's in Liverpool, it means that we have to do things a bit differently anyway, because it's not like Britain. It's almost like a country in itself. It's like a republic. Some people actually refer to Liverpool as a republic. And of course, when we think about Liverpool, it's got a brilliant international reputation through stuff like the Beatles, or Everton and Liverpool football clubs. But of course, there's a lot more to any place than the big cliches. This is the construction of the FACT Centre, which will be 10 years old next year. So it was a £12 million new build, with 4 cinemas, 2 galleries, a bar, a cafe, education rooms and all that kind of thing. And interestingly, it formed part of a regeneration scheme. And in its 10th year, it will celebrate alongside the Tate Gallery Liverpool, which will be 25 years old, and the Blue Coat Gallery, which will be 5 years old, the success of culture-led regeneration. in a sense, that's the strap line that all three institutions are going to share to say, actually, these projects have made a positive impact in regenerating a city, which has been through some pretty difficult times. So, this is Liverpool now, yeah, after the regeneration, and there are still large chunks of housing and commercial districts which are as kind of derelict and fallen down as parts of Detroit are. So it hasn't had a complete impact, obviously. And like Detroit, the gaps between different aspects of society are just as great. And that's ethnic, but it's not about race. It's largely about working class communities who live in suburbs and don't use the city centre. So there's a lot of work to do. And whereas if maybe in London or in some of the kind of, posher parts, it's very easy to kind of do art in a very particular way and stay in a very specific context, Liverpool, people are so kind of in your face, yeah, like it's a strongly Irish community, that you can't not get into a very vigorous debate over everything. And likewise, the context of the city informs what I do, and also, probably because of who I am, I'm really interested in sort of vernacular languages and practice. So by way of an introduction, I'm now going to move into what FAT's actually doing, because I was asked to speak about the curatorial. So I'm not a traditional curator. I have curated exhibitions. I've done some commercial shows, doing a Pixar exhibition, doing a Stanley Kubrick exhibition, a games exhibition. They're not really my interests. I am actually very much interested in working directly with artists and thoroughly enjoy those relationships of finding out what makes people tick. But of course, it's increasingly important that we have to think about the audience, and not the known audience, not us good people, but the people who are not actually that interested in art, maybe. And how do we find new strategies to get new ways of communicating going? So, yeah, I'm just going to use these to. These are some of the programs that we're doing at the moment. So very briefly, because I've got a short time. European-funded network program between those cities you can see on the second line down, which is looking at telepresence, bilocality, virtuality. These are themes that for a new media centre will be increasingly important. That we are working locally with communities of people, but we're part of an international hub, and we're a node within that hub. CAV network, that's actually working locally, but using high-speed networks for broadcasting and doing dual parallel communications between 5 centres at the same time. European Media Art Residency Exchange, which has been going since 1993 and has hosted 250 residencies. At the moment, we're partnering between those cities, including Mexico, which is one of the sort of target objective countries to do business with in Britain. Next year, it will move to Canada and to Australia. ArtServe is a psychology science project which is looking at the museum attention and experience using eye tracking and biosensing and heart rate monitors. So it's a scientific project looking at the museum experience, but we're also using that to commission artists as the test case. And it's a festival which we started, Abandoned Normal Devices, which is, in a way, it's where we do our most sort of challenging commissioning. It's a Curator, it's the Olympics opened yesterday in England, and there's been a bit of money sloshing around, and managed to get my hands on some of that. So there's this thing going on at the moment. We are partners in the Liverpool Biennial, Britain's biennial, which I'll talk about a little bit. Open Curated, which I'll come back to at the end, is a programme we ran for 6 months, which was deliberately to ask the questions as to what curating should become. And in a sense, I think this is one of the things we might be asking today, because of course it's, there's some, fantastic curators here. It's wonderful to be able to arrange objects in space in a container. But of course, we've all become curators. All of you are curators. whether it's you're rearranging your iPod list or just the way that we assimilate information and place it in society. So that's something as a discussion item I hope we can as a collectively kind of talk about, and especially within the digital realm, because we've got so much access now to so much. You know, we've all got access pretty much to everything. All right, so I'm just going to show some pictures very quickly, and I'm not going to go into any detail on these projects, maybe a few at the end. So this is an advert. The festival opens at the end of next month, and it flips between Manchester and Liverpool. It's a regional festival. Art Player, this is something I'd like you to actually have a look at online. This is basically, we've set up an online TV channel where we commission work. It's not a TV station, it is an IPTV platform, but we're also commissioning work about art for this environment. And as you can see, we also give channels of the online platform away to different art companies. So the Baltic, 20 Stories High, the Artist Newsletter, there's about 70 different channels which are owned by different institutions. So that's us facilitating other organisations. So this would probably be the segue to the word collaboration, which is very much at the heart of the fact practice. And of course, and maybe Gunalan might say something about this, but in terms of being attracted to new media above and beyond more traditional forms of art like painting or sculpture, that it gave the promise that there would be a different form of interaction or a relational transaction where you can either play with the objects, or you can make the objects, and you can put them into the place where they'll be looked at. And that, for me, is an intrinsically collaborative practice. This is something around the ArtServe project, the scientific project, which again is around augmented reality. I'll come back to this. I've put this in here because it's one of my favourite pictures of all time. It sort of sums up a bit of my recent history. On the left, you've got John Lennon, next to Yoko Ono of Fluxus, next to Nam June Paik, the most formidable new media artist, started doing new media 45 years ago, and Abe Yeshua, who is the technical director at Sony Labs, who invented the video synthesizer. So for me personally, as a video artist who started practicing in the late 70s, using equipment not dissimilar to that, I worked on half-inch black and white video in the very early days. But this is also kind of summarises so many of my interests. Like Fluxus is obviously really significant. We recently did a retrospective of Nam June Paik with the Tate Liverpool, and the technology itself, and of course the Beatles. The Bicycle Film Festival. So I'm going to start talking about social. I'm going to talk a lot about context, and obviously context change, but we have to be very, very conscious of where we're showing and who's going to come. Jeremy Bailey, Canadian artist, been working with him in residence recently, who's also using augmented reality to make these costumes and kind of create sort of fantasies for himself. I think a very interesting artist. Likewise, other examples of what might be described as public urban realm work using interactivity. So KMA, this is an interactive video projection which goes on the floor and tracks people's movement. Very social, no theme, no idea. It's experiential. Hudson and Powell using QR codes is kind of a public game. Kresge, which is using this BBC big screen, which is tracking people's behaviour, and they see themselves, and then there are these graphic interventions which muck around with them. We did a show in 2008 called Skinterfaces. So, you know, biotechnology, of course, is new media. We don't just think about new media as digital. So that's Jan Marish and Stellark, and this was the first sort of major international show of artists who are using biological materials or their own bodies' materials. Recently, with the Anne Festival, we commissioned a picture pong. This was a sort of quick win where we commissioned this installation. He said, give me a bit of extra money and I'll make a feature film. We gave him the bit of extra money and he won the Palme d'Or with a feature film. So we're also very much interested in artists' films, and not in the traditional narrative side. And of course, there's a lot to say about the birth of experimental film or abstract filmmaking, ranging all the way through to contemporary artist film practice. Blast theory, locative media, the city. God knows what that is. Don't know where that came from. That's not even my slide. What was that? Don't know what that is. Oh, I know what that is. That's Alistair Albert. Okay. We also host the oldest community TV station in Britain, Tenant Spin, which was originally a Superflex project. Superflex being an artist group from Copenhagen. They did a year-long project as part of an early biennial, and then they basically said, well, you can do what you want. And it was cable. This is pre-internet. You can do what you want with it after. So FAT kept it. The project has been funded ever since by a social housing company, which is actually quite a big industry, a big business, and they pay for 3 of our staff, basically to do what might be described as a deep community art project. And of course now it's on the internet. But it's about 150 senior citizens all around Liverpool who are part of this, and they've hosted a number of interesting artists and commentators within their studio. And that fellow with the microphone died a month ago, John McGurk. Healthy Spaces is another programme we run where we are commissioning artists to work in healthcare settings. It started out as sort of hospital waiting rooms, but it's increasingly moving into this term healthy spaces. So thinking more about mental health and well-being, not just hospital environments, but how do we create healthy spaces? Whether that's where curiosity can live, and we can be more questioning about what society actually means and how we fit into it. So this is inside the FAT building. So this is the result of a workshop making these flanstellas, these 3D objects made within a virtual environment by children. So quite a strong kids program, very strong one. This project has to be shown because it's one of my favourite curated projects, and again the curating theme. This is the work of Krzysztof Wydziczko, who is originally Polish, has resided in the States for a long time. And in the picture on the bottom right hand, I've got a laser pointer, which if anyone's not paying attention, I've got to zap you with apparently. No, that's Krzysztof there in the black suit. And these people are veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan, and this person is the wife of this person who was in Afghanistan. So basically he did a residency in Liverpool working with vets. He's always worked with people on sort of margins of society, whether that's through being homeless. Increasing over the last sort of 10 years he's been working with veterans of war. And he did this residency where they collectively acquired this Land Rover, which is an Iraq Army Land Rover. The gun turret came off and they replaced it with a video projector. He then did a sort of oral history project where he counselled them effectively. And they told us stories of what their lives had been like, which were pretty moving and difficult, and also for the families, because this has a strong effect on the families, not just the people directly affected. And of course, this is a big sort of taboo subject. There are, lots of people who are veterans of war in society right now, and it's only when they beat their wives up or kick off in a pub that you hear about it. But what he did, he then turned their stories into this very, very elegant video text and projected them onto important civic buildings. So this is the Catholic Cathedral in Liverpool, this building. So in a sense that's a political act. And the reason why I particularly like Krzysztof is because he had a strong influence on me when I was an artist, when he did this project. So I went to see this in 1983, and this is And I spoke to someone, I can't remember who it was, yesterday, who'd seen this in another city. No?
London?
Yeah? This is London, this is Trafalgar Square. Yeah? And he projected it onto Nelson's Column, which of course is a symbol of colonialism, imperialism. It's the heart of the British establishment. He also projected these tank tracks onto this lion on one of the Trafalgar Square plinths. And that in itself was amazing, because in that time this was a big, I think it was like a 10 by 8 slide. It was a high-powered slide projection. So technologically it was a really interesting thing to do. And of course projecting in public space at that time was completely novel. You know, it wasn't being used for corporate or advertising purposes. So it was a new set of technologies, and it was a way of reclaiming public space and artists interfering or disrupting those spaces. But what he did, and this is in '83, Nelson Mandela hadn't been released from prison, and Margaret Thatcher, the then Prime Minister, on the day that I saw this, chose to give, doesn't sound like a lot of money these days maybe, £7 million of British taxpayers' money to P.K. Botha, the Prime Minister of South Africa. And it was a direct slap in the face to the anti-apartheid movement, of which I was part. And the day that she did that was the day that Dishko did this piece of work. And he stayed up all night, and he made a new slide. And for those of you who know Trafalgar Square, adjacent to the National Gallery is the South African Embassy. And he made this slide. And he projected on the South African Embassy. Yeah? And it lasted for about 2 hours before the police shut it down. It created an enormous debate in the press. It raised a really important discussion about matter. And this is something I'm thinking about a lot. When I think about software, I think about networks, I think about identity, data, or data as you might call it. That in terms of, you know, the political effect of projecting the matter of light, which of course is ephemeral, onto something which is more substantial, like a stone building. Yeah? And what was the legality? It led to a legal argument as to what does it mean when you project light onto a building, and about ownership of that surface, which I was fascinated by, and led to me working with a whole range of artists to use projected light. More recently I've started working with AR Manifesta, and I think there are people here who are actually associated with them, and look forward to having a conversation with you. So they're making new work for FACT at the moment. And interesting, it'll be the first time they've worked in an institution at the institution's invitation. Normally they hack the institution. So here we see the work they did when they had an exhibition at MoMA in New York, and MoMA didn't know they were doing the exhibition. They just did it. And obviously it's using augmented reality, so the PDAs that we carry around with us effectively knew where you were and would then project these images into the space. This was one of their acts they did in the Occupy Wall Street project. You hold your PDA up and you would see gold coins falling from the sky. Project they did in Beijing. Sorry, that's the Venice one. This is the work of an artist called Ahmed Bassioni, who we showed 18 months ago. And Shadi al-Natashki, who's an Egyptian artist in his own right, and was this guy's best friend, sort of took upon himself to represent his work. He was Egypt's foremost new media artist who did these works where he was basically using biometrics. He was monitoring his own output of his body. He did a project where he was running on the spot for 33 days in this plastic suit. He was reprocessing his perspiration, monitoring his heart rate, etc., etc., etc. And then he was involved in the Arab Spring. He was in Tahrir Square. He was shot and killed. Of course, he was just another bloke in the square protesting, and he lost his life in the process. But he was also a really good artist, and he happened to be, probably one of the better known Egyptian new media artists. So we showed him recently. So you're beginning to get a bit of a thread that I'm interested in art which makes some kind of political impact. This guy is a good friend, and for me, in terms of how, over to you, how the imagination is so powerful is summarised in this guy's life. So Jacques Tashing is originally from Taiwan. He basically worked on a ship, went to New York, got off the ship, didn't get back on the ship, became an illegal immigrant, and most famously did 6 one-year-long performances, and he's one of my heroes. Each performance lasted a year. And this particular piece we're looking at, which we showed in the Liverpool Biennial 2 years ago, is where he clocked on with a clocking on machine from a factory, and he did it every hour for 1 year, day and night. Yeah, and every time he clocked on, it took a single frame of 16mm film, and that made a 6.5 minute long time-lapse film of his face changing. He's then created an archive out of the cards, out of the photographs. It's actually a very formal artwork, and every 1 year long performance that he made was signed, witnessed by a lawyer. So actually extremely reductive formal artworks, but what a story. Yeah, and that I can talk to somebody on a bus about Tashing, and they know that this is something extraordinary, and it's the artist kind of really wanting to push the boundaries a bit, or make an interference, or be disruptive into the normal stream of things. Now this is again, I was asked to mention something that we're working on right now, but this is for the current biennial. So we opened the biennial in Liverpool on the 14th of September, and you're all welcome. And the way that we organise it is that it's a consortium of local host institutions, the Tate, the Blue Coat, FACT, who've got gallery space, along with a lot of public art commissioning and commissioning within the public realm. This is the FACT selection, which I've just thrown up here. Jemima Wyman from Australia, Akram Zatori from Lebanon, Anna Kirscher and David Panosha from Greece, Pedro Reyes is a Mexican artist. So they're the artists that you would see if you came to FACT in September, October, early November, and I'm inviting you. You can come. Open Curator, this is what I wanted to sort of finish on, to remind myself that we need to be thinking. We can no longer procrastinate. We can't assume that because we've got this fantastic institution, wonderful building, that the audience is just going to come. Yeah, effectively, the world's changed. It's personalised, it's relational. People will come to what they want to see or what they want to partake in. It's our jobs as curators to find the very best and engage in people in the conversation that will broker those relationships between the curator, the artist, and of course the public or the audience. And then of course those public audiences will increasingly become the artist. So the producer models is really, really important, especially if you're interested in moving image or new media. It's a very live thing that we've been experimenting with over 45 years. So we can end with Namjoon Pike, who is a key person, and that's me, and that's it.
Hi everybody, I'm Alison. I am, as of 5 months ago, the curator of contemporary art at the new Eli and Edith Broad Art Museum in East Lansing, Michigan. So what you're seeing on the screen is a rendering of this building, which is set to open in this coming November. And actually, I really should have learned about this project, started talking with the new director of the Broad at MSU, Michael Rush, who's a really amazing visionary in a lot of ways and has constructed a vision for this new museum to be a major international contemporary art center. MSU, for those of you who know, really is an extraordinarily international university with some of the most study abroad programs of any university in the world, which I absolutely did not know before I came and took the job. But it was enough of this kind of exciting idea to come to a brand new building designed by such an important and in some ways challenging architect, funded by an important and in many ways challenging funder, and start a whole new contemporary art museum. I'm coming from the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the Brooklyn Museum, and the Jewish Museum in New York, and long before that, the MoMA. So probably of everybody here, I've been in the most really institutional situations, and I'll definitely talk about that. And this is an institutional museum in a lot of ways, but one with extraordinary freedom. And for those of you who think about curating, I'm coming from a place where there really were 4 curatorial departments. Everything was very traditionally divided: painting and sculpture, photography, new media, architecture and design, and I was in painting and sculpture. So sort of constrained in some ways in terms of the kinds of things I could think about and look at, to go from that to a place where I am, for now at least, the only curator and there really is no other program, gives me an immense amount of freedom. At the same time, Mike talked a lot about context and a lot about audience, and my most unique challenge right now, I feel like, is a little bit about this audience. East Lansing has never had a major contemporary art museum before. There was a wonderful museum, the Kresge Art Museum, actually, that has been there for a long time, which has a general, very strong collection, Greek and Roman to today, some non-Western, some really nice pieces, very much a teaching collection, a very important teaching collection. And part of the gift from Eli and Edie Broad, was that the new Broad Museum would subsume that collection and be a contemporary art museum, but with this sort of non-contemporary collection. So part of the new mission then of this museum is to show contemporary art, and we are fully, almost entirely, almost post-2000 contemporary art museum, and the collection we're building is almost all work made since 2000. So very contemporary, very international, dedicated specifically to investigative concepts, ideas that are social and political. That's my background, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Really seeing contemporary art as a particular lens onto our contemporary moment and working in a very cross-disciplinary way. Because we're a university art museum, we have this unique ability to play very cross-disciplinarily. That's totally not a word. But to really think of what happens at a university where there's especially at MSU, where there's a strong physics department, a strong agriculture department, a strong English department, a sociology department, and find the places where contemporary art kind of sings in those interstitial niches amongst those various disciplines, which is really what contemporary artists are doing now. So I'm going to talk to you today specifically about 2 projects that I'm working on and have started since I got there. And they are projects that are very much born of the place that I have found myself in, and the building that I find myself in. Because this is, again, a totally new museum, a totally new audience. The immediate audience is very different from what I see as the international audience, which is my peers, other people around here. So I'm working hard all the time to think about a program that addresses very many different kind of levels or places of interest and familiarity with contemporary art and with contemporary artists. So I got to MSU and I've been curating for 5 months with no building, which actually is amazing, by the way, and I think a lot of the other people you'll hear from today do that all the time, and it's something I hadn't really done before and something I'm now committed to doing. I got to MSU and learned about the history of it as the first land-grant university, started talking about the amazing agriculture history both on campus and in the areas surrounding it. The ag school at MSU is much different from what I thought an ag school was. While it was founded to really teach and perpetuate a tradition of farming, it's so much today about an international focus on food justice and food sustainability, and that was something that was really, really interesting and resonant to me coming from San Francisco, where a lot of artists are engaged in social practice, or a practice that isn't necessarily object-based, but is in some ways performance-based, with kind of a civic mindedness, a real focus on action and addressing needs and urgencies, both in local communities and in global communities. In San Francisco, as you may know, there's an extraordinary focus on sustainability and eating locally and living locally, not something that I found as prevalent in East Lansing. It was a very different grocery store experience than the one that I was used to when I first got there. But I started talking with a lot of sort of young urban farmers working in Detroit, working in East Lansing, and I realized there is this community here that's fighting hard to make sustainable living and sustainable agriculture a part of everyday life with a very global focus, a commitment to making that a way the world lives. So the very first thing I did at MSU was to start and kick off an artist residency program. And what you see here is the logo. We have a logo of the program. It's called the Land Grant, Art, Agriculture, and Sustainability. And it started because one of my favorite friends and artists in San Francisco, and again, when you get to a place and you have to act really fast and have artists pull things out really fast, you go to your friends. So that's the specialness of kind of the curator-artist relationship. So a lot of what you're going to see here today is friends who have called up and said, listen, can you do me a site-specific project in 3 months? This is the work of Amy Franceschini, who's part of a collective called the Future Farmers in San Francisco, and Amy is a good friend of mine. I gave her the Sika Art Award, which is the Bay Area biennial art award that focuses on artists working and living in the Bay Area. And the project that Amy did for Sika at SF MoMA was to turn the entire front plaza of City Hall in downtown San Francisco into a giant victory garden, the gardens that had kind of perpetrated cities in the United States post-war. And Amy's a graphic designer, she's an activist, and what she did, and this was an enormous undertaking of civic interaction to get this to the place where it was, she completely redesigned. She got permission to totally basically pull up and lay things over the entire front plaza of City Hall in downtown San Francisco, planted these gardens and harvested them and made it an enormous community project so that everybody who passed through this plaza on their way to and from work throughout the day could kind of stop and plant or stop and dig once the harvest came up. She also designed little seed packets which she gave out to anyone who would take one and encouraged people to plant gardens, urban gardens, kind of anywhere in any space around the city. And it became this enormous viral project in the entire Bay Area, which ended with a big Flickr site on the SF MoMA website of just the remnants of this project, which is gardens that people have lived with and planted and still maintain all over the city. So I asked Amy to come and be part of a land grant kickoff event. And the other artist I invited to join for that is the artist Fritz Haig, who you may know. He's an LA-based artist who did a major project called Attack on the Front Lawn, and it's a super simple idea. Essentially, he started in Salinas, Kansas, where he went and convinced a family to give him their front lawn to do with as he would, and he worked with them to tear up like a perfectly, beautifully manicured lawn and turn it into a vegetable garden, which sounds like nothing. And he's done this all over the world. He's done one right outside the Tate Modern. He's done this all over the world, and what he talks about is that particularly in the United States, when he does this, there's an uproar in the neighborhood. What he says is Fox News covers it every single time he does this. And while, yes, it's about sustainability, it's also pointing to the kind of extraordinary luxury that comes from being able to maintain a perfectly manicured front lawn and the social status that has become accorded with that in American and non-American suburban neighborhoods. And to not have to kind of till your own land is a very significant thing, and that the history of the beautifully manicured front lawn is about having the wealth and the ability to not do that. So Fritz has just sort of done this over and over and over again, and he continues his relationships with these people. He has done it in now major institutions. And he's coming to the Broad in the fall to do his very first object-based practice ever, where he's going to weave from collected fabrics from the community a giant rug. And this will be we're going to do a fall annex in September and October in East Lansing in this awesome old gay bar in downtown Old Town called the Chrome Cat. And it's an amazing building, which we've been using this summer. And for September and October, the Chrome Cat will turn into kind of a Fritz Haig study center, annex, rug making center, and the idea is that he collects the garments from different places. He's doing this simultaneously in Europe. He's just starting in Italy as well. And this will start here at the Broad. It will be woven by various members of the community. He's partnering with the MSU Student Organic Farm. He's partnering with the LGBT Center, sort of communities that he relates to, that he thinks are important, that he would like to be involved in his project. And those groups, along with the art students at MSU, will kind of lead these activity days, and Fritz will be there every Sunday to lead discussions around themes that he or they pick, topics that they think are important to talk about and have debates about, almost like an old-fashioned knitting circle, while people collectively weave this rug. And you can stop in, you can weave, you can talk, Fritz will make food. So it's really the changing of the object into a community space. When the museum opens, this rug will move into our education center, where it will continue to grow, and it will go from the Broad to the Hammer in LA and to the Walker Center. So it will grow and grow and grow and grow at all these different places and be this record of practice. All right, now I'm going way too slowly. I got a lot more. All right. I'm showing you the picture of the building again to talk about the fact that the surface of the building is what's very unique to it in a lot of ways. It's this very elaborate, it's called a feat of digital engineering. I don't know what that means, but it's a very elaborate pleated pattern of steel that wraps over the entire building. So the building itself is really a patterned surface. Part of the mission of the Broad, as I said, is to contextualize contemporary art within art history. Because we have this collection, the Kresge collection, we will do contemporary art shows, but we will always try to pull from the Kresge collection or pull from loans to do shows that kind of tell you about how contemporary art has not just kind of sprung from nowhere, but it roots itself in traditions that artists and cultures have been dealing with and thinking about for centuries and generations. This is not centuries and generations old, but these are the Bridget Rileys that are in the collection of the Kresge that I really fell in love with when I first got there and started digging through the collection. And I started thinking about pattern and the pattern of the building. And the building itself is not just a very patterned one, but a very unusual museum. So we can talk about the future of curating even in museum spaces as no longer being about using the white cube. There is really not a white cube to be found in the Zaha Hadid building. It presents its whole new set of challenges with galleries with slanted walls and long angled galleries that kind of end literally in a corner or have corners like this and walls of glass, which make it an extraordinarily lovely and enticing space full of complicated sightlines, but there is no teleological march through the white cube possible in this space at all. And one of the things I really wanted to do for my first big show, my first object-based show there, was to let the building be what it is, let the light be what it is, let the surface be what it is, let people come in and kind of see something sort of spectacular and opulent and seductive, but still significant and interesting. I'm going to skip these, which have nothing to do with anything, and tell you about what I'm doing. I'm doing a show called Pattern, Follow the Rules, and it's about very contemporary artists rethinking the notion of pattern. Pattern has been something that in 20th century Western art history has been kind of denigrated. I was going to talk to you a little bit about the Jackson Pollocks that got turned into wallpaper in Vogue, or a feminist movement of pattern and decoration, which got a little bit sidelined in the history. But I've asked a few artists to respond to the building and do large-scale installations that can live on angled walls or live in corners with glass, but that have to do with the idea of pattern in a very architectural, mathematical, or scientific way. If you think of not a decorative pattern so much, but something driven by a computer pattern, like a dress form or a set of systems, something that informs the form other than just a pure aesthetic drive. And of course, all of these works are incredibly aesthetic, but this is the work of Alison, who makes these amazing, what she calls string drawings on the wall. And I'm going to show this to you up close. She puts pins in the wall and then she weaves string according to a pattern that she's created on the computer. And what you get when you walk into a gallery with an Alison is this total inability to find yourself and the object in space in some ways. This image kind of seems that it's hovering three-dimensionally, almost like a hologram out into your space, and then it kind of misses, it kind of collapses into the shadows on the wall. So again, this show is very much about opticality. It's very much about systems that construct something patterned and spectacular. Pei White, an LA-based artist, is another artist working with fabric. And for me, there's a very significant social, historical aspect to this, thinking about the tradition of craft and the pattern and decoration movement, and these artists, women artists in these two instances, taking that material and using something very scientific and very mathematical to make something quite different. This is Pei White makes weavings, tapestry weavings. This is an image of crumpled tinfoil that she took a photograph of, and the colors that you see in it are the tinfoil reflecting something else from her studio that was shining in it, scans it, manipulates it, and sends it off to be woven in Belgium into a giant tapestry. This is actually the curtain at the Opera House in Oslo. This is Pei's most recent tapestry, one similar to the one that will be at the Broad. But again, it's this kind of fool the eye, trompe-l'oeil effect, very much born of the ability of her material, but also the technology of her practice. So these are, again, from a distance, this play happens. What you have is something that looks like it's shining, looks like it's shimmering. As you get up close to it, it's completely matte. It's a completely matte piece of fabric. That's Pei. Taube Auerbach, another artist that I've worked with a lot, very interested in sets of statistics and problem solving. These are, and systems of randomness. She did a photographic series where she just photographed and photographed and photographed static on the TV, which is supposedly a completely patternless image, and the more that she photographed it, the more that she found over and over again. She got a very systemized pattern that would appear randomly. What she's doing for us is what you see on the floor in front of this image. She calls it her 50-50 floor, where she brings black and white tiles and fills a space by flipping a coin. Tells you black or tells you white, and what you get is a pattern, again, born entirely of chance, but in the end, something very aesthetic and something that totally overtakes your entire environment. Finally, of course, Zaha Hadid is not the first person to put patterning and meaning and things like that into architecture. I'm thinking about this Islamic tile that's in the collection of the Kresge, and one of my favorite works that I've seen in the last few years was the Imran Qureshi installation in the Sharjah Biennial. This is Imran Qureshi installing this, which he had this courtyard, and he's doing this tradition of Indian miniature painting, working with a tiny brush, dipping it in a tiny pot of red color, working very carefully to make what you see as this decorative flower pattern on the ground, all over the walls of this space. The final product was this overtaking of the courtyard space, which in that context in Sharjah and in our contemporary political context, it's almost impossible to see something like this without thinking of it as a courtyard covered in bloodshed. But again, it's this kind of meeting place between careful beauty and social impact, sort of miniature scale and grand scale, which are the ideas that I'm kind of trying to tease out in thinking about the role of the Broad, in all honesty, kind of this smaller community, this smaller space, the very grand international vision that we have for what the museum will be and what the museum will and can do, and to find this kind of balance point between aesthetic pleasure and serious social investigation, which is a really hard thing to do in a lot of ways, but something that I'm very committed to doing. So, November 9th, you can come and see the Broad Art Museum, and I hope that you'll come and say hello. It's really not that far away at all, I learned today. So thank you very much for having me here.
Cezanne and Becky, thank you for having us here and bringing together what I think is a really amazing panel of people. And thank you all for coming. It's nice to see. This is the first time I'm in Detroit and the first time I'm in the DIA. So what a great way to get introduced to Detroit, I think. I started with this slide about, and these are comments that I've heard over the years about curators and curating. And some of them I have condensed, some of them I've tried to elaborate a bit more, and some of them I've used as a way of triggering thinking about what it means to curate, not just today, but at any time. And I've used this also as a way of teaching students about thinking about our role as curators. Now, talking about roles, I see myself not entirely as a curator and a curator alone. I think about myself as a person interested in a lot of different things. And sometimes a curatorial project, and I don't mean an exhibition project, a curatorial project becomes the form that inquiry takes. And sometimes it's a written form. Sometimes it's just a conversation I have with people. Sometimes it's a small talk or a symposium that I help organize, I work with people to organize. So my approach to curating, and I thought that some of the others did a great job of talking about their institutional roles. I've never had an institutional role as a curator. I've always worked as an independent curator, and there's some real benefits of that. You don't get tied to particular institutional agendas, which is not good or bad. It's just the way it is. And I've always found it easier to initiate projects, work with people in different institutions, and develop my idea to the point possible. And where it does not seem like the best place, I withdraw pretty quickly. So I'll talk a bit about how I see curating, and hopefully it's useful. I don't see an exhibition, and I see exhibition, as I said earlier, only as one moment in a curatorial investigation. It could well not be an exhibition. And I see an exhibition as a way of making public what we are trying to do. And sometimes the exhibition itself and the context within which an exhibition is. People talked about the white cube. So if it is making public, and we are making it public in a space that has a particular spatial define and is entry by way of invitation, entry by way of paying something, it's always struck me as somewhat difficult. So I see curating exhibitions as a way of working through something rather than as a presentation of something. I've never been particularly interested in the idea of presenting something that already exists. I've always enjoyed the opportunities to start somewhat from scratch, meaning not have an institutional agenda, not have a big question or a proposal that I have to work with, but to actually start with a series of things I'm interested in, start working with a few other people who are interested in similar things, use those discussions as a way of extending the conversation to other people, and slowly developing the idea itself that might sometimes become an exhibition. And as I've just described it, that kind of working through, I've always found it to be essentially collaborative, meaning I do not see the exhibition or anything I put out there as mine. I see it as an essentially collaborative thing simply because it did not exist before I started that conversation with someone or some others. I see curatorial projects as generative, meaning that it did not exist and it evolves over a period of time. As I said earlier, it's co-conceived. For me, it's always co-conceived and co-developed. I start with a set of ideas that I'm interested in and look out for other people who are interested in similar things. And gradually, the project, the idea, the exhibition develops, and I find it extremely fulfilling, simply because it is larger than, it's much more rich than I originally conceived it, and I would have ever been able to execute by myself. I'm a real history geek. I'm really interested in understanding the historical context within which things happen. And I mean historical context rather than origins of things, because history is not necessarily a striving towards what is the origin of something. I'm really committed to media non-specificity. It doesn't really matter what kind of media an artist is is working in for me to work with them. Even though, at least in the last 10 years, I've been doing a lot of projects with art, science, technology, art and media, or media arts, or technology arts. I do not see that as necessarily what I am committed to. I'm committed to media non-specificity. If an artist is interesting and is doing interesting things that resonates with some of the ideas I'm thinking about, and they resonate with what I'm thinking about, then we have a relationship and it goes forward. In that vein, I don't make a distinction between art and other things. And in fact, in many parts of the world, in many cultures, there isn't a distinct notion of art as a clearly defined area of life, area that is separate from life. And I think that I like to believe that I am proceeding from a more culturally wider concept about making rather than just art. People talked about site specificity, and I also think that site is not just a place, site is also the particular cultural elements that are implicated every time you work in that site. So I am always attentive to the culture that I enter in and I work in, and most of the time I very consciously work in cultures and in contexts that are unfamiliar to me, simply because it poses additional challenges and new learning experiences for me. One of the things that I've been really fascinated by is going back to my interest in history, that art, what we experience as art and artistic objects, scientific objects, and technological objects are historically not very different objects. They were sometimes one and the same. And what we have, what we experience today as artists and scientists and people working in technologies were not historically very different people. Sometimes they were one and the same persons. And I've been fascinated by the connections between art, science, and technology, by the inquiry that they represent, the discovery that happens in each of those fields, and how they are different and how they are pretty similar. And another big emphasis for me is curating as a way of shaking something up rather than reflecting back what is there already. I see it as essentially disruptive because it is introducing a set of things that even if it is a reflection back to a context what it already knows, it is presenting it in a way that provides an opportunity for that context to be experienced anew all over again. So I want to talk about 3 projects and very quickly go through some of them. I was asked to be the artistic co-director of the Ogaki Biennale. Ogaki is a very small city, about 40 minutes outside Kyoto. It is for those of you who are interested in haiku, Ogaki is also the birthplace of Matsuo Basho, one of the foremost haiku poets. Ogaki has an interesting history. It is primarily an agricultural town. It still is, but in the bubble economy of Japan, there was a huge interest in diversifying some of these essentially agricultural towns, and Ogaki got chosen to become the IT town of sorts. So overnight, this small little agricultural town had huge industrial size research complexes that were investing in IT infrastructure, high-end computing, high-end visualization, huge robotics facilities were being built in Ogaki. And the Biennale was started in 2004, and primarily as a way of bringing those clearly separated communities together. And I found that extremely challenging. And Ogaki has also an interesting history. It has one of the largest communities of Brazilians in Japan, outside Tokyo. Japan is a very large Brazilian community, and Ogaki has got a second large concentration. So I was interested also in the cultural diversity of what we experience essentially as a homogeneous society. So we looked at a variety of sites. It's an amazing town. It's a town with lots of interesting moats going around it. Fascinating gardens, shari gardens all across. And what we tried to do was to select sites all across the town. So we selected almost 70 sites across the town, and we commissioned about 35 works, and many of them were in Shinto shrines, they were in the imperial palaces, they were in summer homes of the emperors. So this is one work, so by Hisako Koyama, called Kodama. Kodamas are actually natural spirits that, according to Japanese Shinto traditions, Kodamas are natural spirits that inhabit the forest, and they are supposed to be like echoes. You know, whenever you are in the forest and you say something, it echoes back to you. So Hisako was very interested in trying to explore that, and this installation was installed in a Shinto shrine, and it was amazing how it was an active Shinto shrine, meaning people were regularly going there for prayers, but the work was housed there. This is a work by Rux Media Collective, which is an art group from New Delhi, India, and this was installed inside an old bank vault. The bank had been abandoned for a while, and they had decided that they will use this space for art. And we ended up taking over the vault, and the artists, because they were looking at notions of secrecy and documentation that was documenting people and how it was used as a way of policing people. This was very well housed inside the vault. This is a work by 3 artists, and it's a perpetual sound machine, and it was installed also in a Shinto shrine. I'm going a little quickly simply because I'm aware of the time. This is a beggar robot that was installed in the city. It basically asks for money, and you know, as a town that has a long tradition of Buddhist and Shinto monks who actually have, as part of their religious vows, they beg. It was really interesting to see how people reacted to it and actually gave money. I will spend a little more time on this project simply because I think it indicates some of the challenges that we face as curators. The International Symposium in Electronic Art is a biennial media art exhibition that has been all around the world, and usually cities bid to actually get to host the show. It usually comprises of exhibitions and a large conference. So I got selected to be the artistic director for this for IZEA in Singapore, and basically I decided to work not by showing works, a large number of works, but actually using the exhibition as a way of creating new works altogether. And all the works that were developed in Singapore. Artists, I raised almost $2 million to actually do everything that we did in this exhibition. The exhibition was triggered by an artist in residence program where 23 artists were in residence in Singapore in over 12 research labs or research centers that they chose. So the artists were asked to submit proposals for works that they wanted to do, which interacted with particular research centers that they had an interest in or affinity towards, or which they felt they would benefit from. So the artists were in residence for up to 3 months, and they created their work from scratch. This is a work by Clea Wade called Waterbook, which was a water-based interface. So people actually went into the space and were interacting with water in order to get a whole series of stories and narratives about water. For those of you who might not know, Singapore is a very small island which has, for the longest time, struggled with water issues. They do not have ready access to water. This is another work that actually looked at water, but it took an interest in issues of sourcing, dowsing. So it was looking at early dowsing technology as a way of thinking about how that intersects with new technologies. This is a work by Ji Hyun Oh, which is a fascinating work because there's nothing new media about it. I mean, strictly speaking, she introduced a word gori, which is a Korean word for seed, and she introduced it in order to develop a whole series of reactions on a Wikipedia page that allowed her to then abstract data that she then inscribed onto these rolls of paper. So throughout the exhibition, she was updating the dynamic changes that were happening on her Wikipedia page each night. This is a work by Tat Amitano, who was a Filipino artist who did a series of works on solenoid beaters that were used as a way of triggering a sound insulation. This is a fascinating work. It's designed like a game. It's a group called Gender and Space based in Bombay, and they were working on issues of women and how much they are able to inhabit urban spaces. This is a work by Momoko Toramitsu, and she basically was interested in the concept of the smile. And she worked with a face recognition lab in Singapore and developed a series of works around investigating the smile and signatures of smiles. The context of this is that Singapore has had, for the longest time, had something called the courtesy campaign, which is to actually get Singaporeans to smile more. I'll end off with this. This is an exhibition I co-curated with a Brazilian curator called, this is part of the festival in Mexico City on electronic art and video. And it was actually hosted in this, in an art space called Laboratorio de Alameda in Mexico City. And this is a 17th century church, and it has amazing spaces. What we, Eduardo de Jesus and my co-curator and myself were interested in is looking at the concept of the local. What does it mean to be located today in relation to everything else that you are infused with? So we were interested in the density of the location. So we had a variety of artists. This is a Brazilian group that was investigating concepts of location in relation to travel. So people's experiences in relation to other locations were mapped by them standing in front of a green space and getting themselves located in remote locations. This is a work by Edgar Andres, which actually looked at collecting debris that was left by refugees who had secretly found their way to the US from the Caribbean islands. This is a work, the Chernobyl project by Alice Michelli, who's a Brazilian artist, and she has been for almost 3 years documenting, making images of the spaces in Chernobyl. And this image here is the one on the right is actually what images you get if you are using a standard photograph, a standard camera. And this is a work by Ashok Sukumaran, who is an artist based in Bombay. And Ashok was interested, has been working on a series of works called Recurrencies, and he intervenes into electrical grids of different cities and tries to rework them to show the context within which electricity distribution, who controls it, functions. So in this work, he actually created, intervened into a large display that was actually being used for celebration of Independence Day. He reworked it to display a corn, and some of you might know that Mexico ends up importing, even though it produces a lot of corn, it ends up importing, because of the NAFTA agreement, imports a lot of corn from the US. And he was interested in the whole relationship between corn importation, energy economics, especially with regard to corn being used for ethanol, and the prices of corn. And he was working with a corn vendor on the street to actually redirect and use it as a large billboard for redirecting sales to this corn vendor, who was suddenly realizing she had to raise her prices in order to remain, to remain in business, because corn prices were going up in Mexico. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Kitty Anderson. I'm the curator at the Common Guild in Glasgow. Thank you, Cezanne and Rebecca, and for this invitation. I've always wanted to come to Detroit, and this is a really wonderful opportunity, so thank you. So I thought I'd start by talking a bit about art, the context that we're working in. It's funny not being able to see what's going on there. The obvious place to start is Glasgow. Glasgow is the largest city in Scotland. And as you can see, it was built around the River Clyde, which you see running through the image there. It became wealthy due to the fact that there was a river and became a port city, where trading became absolutely crucial to the city's wealth, and lots of incredible architecture and buildings and institutions were founded because of that. And then through the, sorry, I just realised I've got my notes in my bag, which, as a result of all of the wealth that came into the city, lots of people came too, and the population started growing exponentially. So in the 1930s and 40s, the population of Glasgow was over 1 million. And when I was doing some of the research for Glasgow and Detroit, I thought, my God, you know, all these similarities that we've got here, population, similar stage, and then as I flew in over Detroit, and you can imagine this is the comparable image when you fly in over Glasgow. We're like the size of downtown, I think, and that's it. So there is no comparison really, but we were a huge industrial city built on shipbuilding, and then shipbuilding went into decline. And people were made unemployed, and population started to decline hugely. And the current population is more like 500,000 now. So a lot of empty spaces. And yeah, as I said, I thought it was similar, but it's not really that similar. I was gonna. So Glasgow today has changed quite a bit, because we're now becoming quite a financial centre, and that's become the whole new industry for the city. So there is money coming back into the city, and there are people coming back in quite gradually, but quite steadily. This is the centre of the city, and what you see there is the university in the background, which is a fundamental part of the city's identity as well. It was founded in the 15th century, so it's been around for 500 years. It was the centre of the Scottish Enlightenment. It's a very important part of what we do. And then I wanted to use that as a way of leading on to Glasgow School of Art, which was established in 1845. This building was built by Charles Rennie Mackintosh in 1897. He was actually a former student of the school as well. But yeah, I was going to also point out designed by Charles Rennie McIntosh, whose work is on view here at DIA, so that's quite exciting for me to see on the other side of the world. What I wanted to talk about with the art school actually was the Sculpture and Environmental Art course, which was established in the 1980s, and I think that was a fundamental turning point in the changes between Glasgow's relationship with contemporary art. The course introduced a new way of looking at the field of sculpture, basically by saying, look at the city, look at the context in which you're working first and foremost. And this course has been credited for the success of a lot of Glasgow artists, and in particular a huge run of Turner Prize winners. And I've brought a short clip for you to have a look at, which gives you kind of the sense that the Turner Prize is like the Oscars. I think you heard of the sound check earlier, that huge applause, which I'll play you in a minute. And also just to say that it starts off at the Common Guild. So it's a BBC documentary, which I think you can find online if you're interested in watching the whole thing. This is Alan Yentob, who's the presenter, whose voice you'll hear, and Simon Starling, who's one of the Turner Prize winners. Let's see if this works.
Now, where am I? People milling about.
This is the Common
This
Guild.
must be the right place. I've been told I'll meet more Turner Prize winners here in this house in Glasgow than anywhere else in the world. Ah, he looks familiar.
So, the winner of the 2011 Turner Prize, Martin Boyce.
And I went there, and there was the most amazing group of people waiting for me. And most of them are in this room, which is quite amazing, 20 years on.
Many of them are in this room too. An opening of the Glasgow International Art Festival.
This year's Turner Prize, Simon Starling.
This group of friends in this city.
The winner of the 2009 Turner Prize is Richard Wright.
The winner of the 1996 Turner Prize is Douglas Gordon.
Douglas Gordon also sang the same group in his own idiosyncratic way.
I'd first of all like to say thanks to my family and also the other family, the kind of Scotia Nostra. They know who they are.
Douglas Gordon, Scotia Nostra. He's here somewhere, but I can't find him. Which is odd, because this is his house. If this crowd is the Scotia Nostra, does that make Douglas Gordon the godfather? 20 years ago, Glasgow's young artists set out to do their own thing in a city that's rather better known for football, fizzy drinks and fish and chips than it is for, well, the visual arts. And yet, in this place of grit and glamour, they've created groundbreaking art and turned Glasgow into an international art capital where the unlikeliest things can happen.
Slightly strange sound things going on there, but basically the first bit that we missed from Martin Boyce was him thanking all of his peers, and the film is it's an hour-long documentary, and it basically is trying to explore why and how Glasgow became so successful, and there's this term about the Glasgow miracle, so what's it all about? And one of the things, maybe three things that they try and work out. One is that support from the peers. Then the space, the fact that there was a lot of space, a lot of studio space available for artists to use as studios and exhibition space, and also the liberty that's gained from not being London. The fact that there's that bit of freedom, there's less cynicism and less people to judge you. But I think one of the things that the film missed out was something about, I think is really crucial to what goes on in Glasgow, is this DIY aesthetic, or the fact that you could create your own opportunities. And that's something that I wanted to use just to run through some other organisations in Glasgow, one of which is the Modern Institute, which was founded in 1998, originally as an artist-run space, and is now one of the most successful commercial galleries in the UK. This is an exhibition by Jim Lambie, who was one of those Turner Prize nominees. And they're a very different model, Transmission, which is an artist-run collective space, which was established in '83 by graduates of the art school who found that they didn't have an exhibition space that they could use, so they set it up to show their own work. And this is still standing, and it's still got this collective body that changes every 2 years and keeps the city going, and it keeps a real nice generation of new fresh blood. And then the third space would be the Common Guild, which is a very different space both from the One Institute and from Transmission, but was essentially established to fill the gap in the arts provision in Glasgow. And more specifically, it was about trying to find a place to present high quality projects with international artists who hadn't shown in Scotland before, or at least hadn't shown for a long time. And on that note, just to run through some things about the Common Guild. We were founded in 2006, our first project was in 2007, so we're only 5 years old, and I'm quite conscious of the sort of new organisations versus the 10 years old organisations, so we sit quite nicely in the middle at the sort of 5 years old. The Common Guild, the name Common is the idea of us being democratic, we're for everyone, public space, free to get in, everyone can come, but Guild, the idea that this is actually the best of the best, so we're introducing people to things that they need to know about. There's plenty of other spaces in Glasgow who are showing emerging artists, and this is just this is something else that needed to be done. And then as you can see there, the strapline for the organisation is visual arts projects, events and exhibitions, which I realise covers absolutely everything, but I think that's quite important, saying that we're an organisation that can do anything that comes our way and looks interesting. And connected to that, we're a very small team, and we've got this beautiful house that we're in, which you might have heard in the film is actually Douglas Gordon's house. When he became successful, he was smart enough to buy property around the city and then generous enough to hand it out to people who needed to use it. So we're actually a very small team, just 2 full-time members of staff and 3 part-time. And we're very mobile as a result of that, which is nice. And this thing that we can take up any opportunities that are interesting to us. We've got various long-term projects that are, have been in the pipeline for 2 or 3 years, but we've also got projects that, an opportunity arises and, from inception to presentation is just a couple of months, which is quite an exciting way to be able to respond to things. We're funded primarily by the Scottish Government through an organisation called Creative Scotland, which is undergoing all of its own changes at the moment, which is a whole other conversation, but quite interesting. A little bit from the City Council, and then various trusts and foundations that support individual projects. Obviously, I'm tempted to tell you about everything we've ever done, but I'm aware that time may not allow for that, so I might flick through some of these images, but what I'll start with is just to give you a sense of the range of what we're doing, so the projects, events and exhibitions. When we were first founded, we just had a small office space. We weren't in that beautiful building, so there was nowhere to show work. So our first project in 2007 was at Edinburgh International Festival, where we presented Jardin Public, which was working with 3 international artists who were working with different kinds of publics and different kinds of audiences. Michael Lynn, who produced this amazing seating area in a park in the centre of Edinburgh, which was well used due to the glorious weather, which is a rare thing. Apollonia Sistosic, who worked with a residents' association in a neighbourhood garden. So this is their back court, which was previously concrete, and brought in this beautiful garden, working with all of the residents. And then finally Richard Wright, who did a beautiful, I don't know how much you can see in your image there, but a wall painting directly onto the walls and ceilings of this private house in Edinburgh, which was then painted over after the exhibition. So 3 very different spaces, 3 very different audiences, but I think it's quite a nice starting point for what it is that we've been doing. Martin Creed, who did one of his band performances at the School of Music and Drama, which involves a whole different audience. Rodney Graham Band, who did a live music event in a fantastic, former cinema, now music venue in the centre of Glasgow. And you can imagine what each of these venues bring their own audience with them. Then there's a series of talks that we've been doing since the beginning called Detours, which is bringing international curators and museum directors to Glasgow to talk about the institutions that they have founded and the relationship between programme and place in each of those organisations. So we've been working with people like Juliana Engberg from Melbourne, Richard Flood, close to home, Maria Lind, Nicholas Schaffhausen, lots of international curators. And I think what's also really interesting to say is that they don't just come and talk, but they do lots of studio visits while they're there. And there's been a really nice sort of follow through of artists that they've met while they've been in Glasgow, then going and showing in all those places. So keeping a dialogue open. Then in 2008, when Douglas Gordon kindly offered use of his space, this was on a temporary basis, we did a group show. And there's maybe a group show every year. If we was work roughly on doing 3 or 4 shows a year. This was a lovely show with Ronnie Horn, Philippe Perrenot, Adele Abdessemed, and then I'm flicking straight onto this to say that we then went on to do a solo show with Adele Abdessemed, and there is that kind of continuity through a lot of what we do. So you'll see that we worked with Martin Creed before, and we worked in that event context, and then we worked with him on an exhibition. Spencer Finch, Ronnie Horn, who was in that first show. I've got a few more pictures of this just to show you how some of the artists respond to the domestic architecture of the space that we're in. So artists are often drawn to these mirrors. This was the first time Ronnie had ever tried using her work in this way. And this was a beautiful relationship with these photographs of Isabelle Huppert that reflected off one another. Really, really haunting photographs, and the idea of having to spend all day with them, well, it was several weeks with them, was quite experience. Ripta Cantor, who again you can just see here, he's written a text in smoke on the ceiling, which the mirror on the other side of the wall then reflects. So there's permanently plays with the mirrors because you just kind of can't help it. Martin Creed, who we saw earlier, but these tables, of course, take on a whole new meaning when you see them in the equivalent of a dining room. And there's a lamp that goes on and off in the background there, which again, in the hallway of a Victorian house, looks quite appropriate. Gerard Byrne, Robert Barry, Tasta Dean, Ulla von Brandenburg. This was the project that came to fruition in less than 2 months. It was a beautiful, beautiful show. And this, again, you're seeing a reflection between the mirror and the video projection, which you can imagine that the artists need to feel comfortable with something like that, but it's always on the artists, not even their agreement, it's their suggestion very much that allows for those things. You've seen The Same as Always, which was a group show about the use of the artist's hand, and this is a beautiful Yvonne Rayner piece, which if you haven't seen, you must look it up online. It's called Hand Movie. It's incredible. Claire Barkley, a Scottish artist. So the group shows often allow for the relationship between international and Glasgow. And Hans-Peter Feldman in the background. Teodor Jadzi, a fantastic sculptor based in Berlin. And How to Look at Everything, which was a film and video show with Simon Martin, Zbigniew Baladran, and several others. I'm really running out of time, so Glasgow International Festival of Visual Art is a big event in the art calendar in Glasgow. And Katrina Brown, who's the director of the Common Guild, has been the director of the festival for the last 2 outings. And it's a traditional biennial in the sense that it happens every 2 years and it's citywide. But what's quite unusual is that I think there were 40 venues in the last exhibition, and most of those are initiated and organised by the spaces themselves. So there is a director's programme, which you saw a flash of Jeremy Della's Bouncy Stonehenge, which was a very popular work. Carla Black, who had this amazing pile of sawdust in the Gallery of Modern Art. Then there was a retrospective of Richard Wright's works on paper. The Common Guild presented 3 projects, one of which was Wolfgang Tillmans, which was this incredibly beautiful show of recent works upstairs that Wolfgang hung himself, and they were all unframed, which is I guess the other benefit that we get from the domestic environment is that people have a very different relationship with the work, and you can take those risks of leaving them unframed. And then there was all the works downstairs from the Arts Council collection. Ruth Ewan, who is a young Scottish artist based in London, who presented an amazing research-based project on the history of the Socialist Sunday School movement in Glasgow. And this was presented at another Rennie Mackintosh building, which is the Scotland Street School Museum, primary school that's now turned into a museum. And this was an archive and research-based project on the Socialist Sunday Schools, which was a sort of forgotten part of Glasgow's history. And that was accompanied by a series of events and a publication and a film with former students, which is amazing, too much to talk about. Melbourne and Glasgow, and I mention this because it's a collaboration, and as I've mentioned, there have been other collaborations through what we do, but this is with the Australian Centre of Contemporary Art in Melbourne, and it's part of a 4-year project that we're doing with them. Joshua Petherick, Piece on the Underground, Bianca Hester, who did a sounding with these rings in a car park, and Larissa Kosloff, who worked with doing a sound piece in a bowling club. Art Fund International and GOMA, this was an amazing grant that we got of £1 million to spend over 5 years with the Gallery of Modern Art, and we've been able to help contextualise their existing collection whilst bringing in some of these international names that have been so important but so often unseen and very rarely owned in Glasgow, and that includes Peter Hujar, Hans-Peter Feldman and Ronnie Horn, so you can see we've got a particular interest in those works being collected. Very quickly to flash through that this upcoming project, which is called Project for Parks, working title, and that's working with the former bandstand sites in parks around Glasgow. As you can see in the middle of the image here, that is a bandstand, surrounded by people, because these were really the hubs of political activity in Glasgow. When any of the marches came through the centre of town, they would end here and people would be giving the speeches, and there would be the sort of social part of the parade here. And most of these sites have fallen into disrepair. This is the same site that you're looking at. The actual structure is gone, and the sort of amphitheatre seating is all you can really see, but it's been closed off because it's unsafe. So we're currently in the process of working with the local community and an artist to bring this site back into use, and we'll be hopefully presenting that project next year. If we're currently filling it, that big hole underground with concrete, so these things take time. As you might have seen in the biography, the Common Guild will be presenting a project in Venice next year, the sort of our national pavilion called Scotland Venice, and we're going to be working with Duncan Campbell, Hayley Tompkins, and Corin Swan, and then so please come. That's to say June next year in Venice. Come and see us. And then the other invitation is, of course, Glasgow International 2014, which will be under new directorship. In fact, they just put out the call for new director today. But the other reason to come to Glasgow in 2014, of course, is that we'll be hosting the Commonwealth Games. So it'll be a great place to be. And Glasgow International is the city at its best. So please come. Thank you.
So before I start, I would like to thank Cezanne first, because it's such a privilege for me to be here, to be part of this very interesting panel so far. I hope it will continue like this. And through Cezanne, I really would like to thank the Kresge Foundation, and also I would like to thank Rebecca and DIA for hosting us, and I would like to thank you. You're so overwhelmed and exhausted, and the weather is beautiful, but you're still here, so thank you. So, well, I'm starting. So what I'm going to do today is that I'll try to be in my time schedule, I hope. But what I'm trying to do now is I will be talking very briefly about my curatorial line, and I'm going to mention a few projects in order to navigate through this line. And then I'm going to be focusing on only one project, which is quite just the opposite of what Alison was talking about, and because in this project there's no institution is involved. So let's see. Okay, so my curatorial line, I have my research area, or my curatorial practice has having 3 tracks indeed. And one of them is memory and memory reconstruction, and the second one is control mechanisms, and the third one is spatial issues. And I'm an independent curator, but maybe I should say a few things about my background. First, I studied literature, and then I studied graphic design, and I did my master thesis purely on visual rhetorics and advertising. Then I hated advertising so much, and then I moved to communication design and communication and information design, and also I merged it together with philosophy and music for my PhD. And then I was also interested in, at the same time, in contemporary art. So I was writing and curating small shows, but till 2002, I worked as a graphic designer, and I even worked as a creative director and here and there. And in 2002, I decided to move my entire, or canalize my entire career or entire energy, and where my passion is, which is still art. So I did the curatorial program in the Apple in Amsterdam. Maybe it's very normal for you, but indeed I'm the first person from my country that did such an education, and after me now new generation is coming. So I'm kind of basically the third generation curator from Turkey. I'm quite excited, I don't know, I'm nervous, I don't know why. Anyway, so I just wanted to give you all this information. So basically what I'm going to say is that from where I'm coming from, there's no tradition of museums, there's no infrastructure, so whatever we were doing is, it happened for the last maybe 20, 30 years. Because we had, like in 60, 71, and 83 coup d'etats, military regimes, which cut the entire life and has serious lapses and pauses in the social and cultural life. So everything really emerged, for me especially, starting from 90s. So basically, whatever we have done up to now was, we were trying to find or establish the infrastructure. So it's exciting because whatever you do, you become history. I mean, we founded Nomad. Nomad is an organization in 2000. It was in 2003. Nomad it's an organization based on digital culture and sound art. And so we did, for instance, the first sound art festival in Turkey. We introduced sound art to Turkey. So it's so exciting. Whatever you are doing is really becoming history, becoming really I don't know, maybe interesting names, but at the same time, you're doing it from scratch, from nothing. And there's still not any governmental subsidy or state-based subsidy possible for anything about contemporary art in Turkey. They're only supporting, not the Ministry of Culture, but the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is only supporting the Turkish Pavillion in Venice, that's it. And apart from it, you are getting funded only from the private sector, or I don't know, from Europe mostly, or from other international funds. So basically, I would like to say 3 words about my obsessions. I'm really obsessed with documentation and archiving, and I'm really obsessed with publications, because for each and every project that I'm making, although I really have a tendency to do a lot of technological and digital things, I really would like to have physical books. It's an obsession, it's a fetish, but I think it really works because it also creates kind of an archive. And also, one more thing, none of my projects are coming from here and there. It's also a continuation. There's always a network in between my works and my projects, also with the Nomad works. So each work really urges or really calls the other work. So there's always a continuation line, and sometimes I'm multitasking, but it doesn't mean that I'm schizophrenically doing hundreds of things at the same time. They're really in the same parallel. Okay, so before. So what I was saying is that according to this tracks, these are some of my exhibitions, but I really would like to say a few things about them. Maybe I should say a few things about Eclipsed Voices. Eclipsed Voices indeed started in, it says in 2010 because it's the Vienna presentation. It started in 2006 with a series of screenings, and it was about personal narratives, because it was kind of a search what it is, what history is, and how history and collective memory can be opposed to individual memories and individual narratives, and how you can look at the history once again, and how you can look at the facts and environments around you from another perspective by rereading the history. So it continues, for instance, it continues with many things, but maybe unrecorded can be another. Okay, Detroit Institute of Arts doesn't accept this. Okay. Okay, unrecorded was a project. It's okay. Unrecorded was a project. It was an attempt to understand the relation between memory and spaces, and how spaces with loaded memory can be. How you can empty their memories, and how you can overload or load again another memory. And it was a search for really the relationship between any kind of space. It could be a mediated space, it could be a physical space, it could be a psychological space, together with memory. So through this research, let's try this. No. Through this research, I did Unrecorded in 2008, and it was it resulted as a group show in Istanbul. It was an international group show, and my research on memory, and especially space and labs of memory, continued till 2009. And it resulted with the Lapses project. And Lapses project was the project I did for the Venice, for the Turkish Pavillion, together with Banu Cennetoğlu and Ahmet Övüt. And it is also based on a very interesting research project that lasted like 8 months, because we started with we basically started with researching a lot of philosophical texts about lapses, what lapses is, but we started with the memory. And at some point, I commissioned Jalal Tufik, who is a wonderful Lebanese-based, Lebanese-born Arab thinker and Arab philosopher, to edit a book for us. So he edited a wonderful book with William Chiswick, with with Ibn Arabi, with Brillo and whatsoever. So we on top of this text, we started to work with the artist, and it resulted with the Lapses project. Anyway, all through these projects, I really would like to now come to Uncovered project. And Uncovered is indeed a project that is not based in Istanbul or in Turkey, but it is also about Turkey. Uncovered project is about the Nicosia International Airport. So I don't think that you have, maybe you have some information about Cyprus. Cyprus is an island, and the inhabitants of the island is Turkish Cypriots, Greek Cypriots, Turkish army, and the UN. So I'm not going to read them all, but I would like you to do multitasking while I'm talking. I want you to read it so that you can have a little bit idea about what it is. But basically, it's a divided island, and what happened is that we call this island our baby island, and it's divided into two. One part belongs to Greek Cypriots, and the other parts belong to Turkish Cypriots, and there's a republic there, belongs to Northern Turkish Republic, we say, Northern Turkish Cypriot Republic, but basically Turkey is the only country that recognizes this country. So it's a very problematic island, and it's also very interesting because Manifesta, maybe you heard about Manifesta, you know it, I'm so sure. Manifesta also tried a shop there in 2006 or 7, and it collapsed because of the political situation. Basically, they couldn't they couldn't go on, and it's a kind of an island of impossibilities. So what happened is that, according to the history, in 1974 there was a war, and Turkey Turkey basically interfered to this war with her army, and everybody agrees that when they interfered, it was really good because it saved a lot of lives from both sides. But the thing is that the Turkish army went to the island in 1974, and they never leave. They never left. So it's funny that the entire operation starts in 1974 with the code that Ayşe is a Turkish name, Turkish girl name, and Ayşe is going for holiday. And there's a huge joke still in the island. Ayşe's holiday is too long now because it's been 37 years. So basically, although we love Cyprus and everything, Cyprus is, for us, the Turkish part is the backyard of Turkey because, for instance, gambling is illegal in Turkey, but gambling is legal in Cyprus. So there's a huge tourism about gambling there. But the funny thing is that if you look at the gambling houses and casinos and hotels, only 2% belongs to Turkish Cypriots, 98% belongs to Turkish businessmen. So it's kind of the black money laundry kind of place, and also there's a lot of cases about prostitution. And also, I mean, it's an island that everything happens. I mean, we love it. We go there for holiday, and we have no idea what's going on there. Because in 1974, this operation that I was talking about, as the Turkish army interfered, it was. I'm going to be fast after this. I know this part. When Turkish army went there, we call this. I mean, Turkey called this Operation of Peace, and the entire world called this invasion. So basically, I just would like to tell a few more words about my position, because I think it's quite important there. From both sides, from both Turkish Cypriots, some of them, and for Greek Cypriots, for all of them. I'm the occupier as Turkish. And for the UN, I'm the problem maker. So I'm kind of the only one in the island who is not wanted and liked, basically, because of my nationality. So when I was invited in 2010 to give a series of seminars in the island, in the northern part, I was invited to a nice lunch together with Greek Cypriots and everything. In 2004, the border was open for both of them, so they can pass to each other, to each other sides. And I can't pass to the other side if I come from the illegal airport, but it's another issue. Anyway, then the UN smuggles me and so forth. But the thing is that during this lunch, they were talking about an abandoned airport, and I was so interested in this because, and they were talking about the fact that there was two cultural managers from both sides, and they were providing artworks for the peace talks where it was taking place in the UN officers, where they're stated in this abandoned airports area. And in each and every conference, they were trying to provide artworks to this conference room, which looks like a little bit decorative, but I mean, there's no hope for peace anymore. So UN was trying to, raise some attention to it and so forth. But then Vicky Periclous, who is a Greek Cypriot artist, came with a project proposal saying that I would like to use the airport and to do an artwork. And then these two cultural managers decided to do a kind of a bigger show, like an exhibition there. So at that moment they met me and we were talking, and they asked me my advice and how I should do it and so forth, how they should do it, and I was thrilled by the idea that, because it was about memory, everything is about this. This is the and it's the building was built in 1968. It's the most important modernist building in the island, and it's beautiful avant-garde modernist building, but it was used only 6 years. And when it was built, it was the first kind of social space, just like working like a shopping mall or something for everyone. So everyone was going there not only for taking their plane or something, but they were going there to celebrate their graduations. They were going there for window shopping. It was a social space basically. And then with the war, it was gone. So these are the kids. If someone was coming really important to the island, they were collecting kids from villages, and they were just making them to wave to the comers and so forth. So there are hundreds of stories. Because anyway, let me tell you the story about this project. So I was so thrilled. So I was not satisfied only by giving advice. I said I would like to do this project. And they said, "Are you mad? You're really Turkish? Yeah, it's impossible. And you're working with the UN." I said, "No. Then what is the equation? How can we do this?" So they say, "Okay, if it's Turkish Cypriot, if it's by a communal project, there must be a Greek Cypriot. If there's a Turkish, then we should find a Greek." I said, "No, let's find a Greek Cypriot curator. Let's start." And I was very lucky because Pavillion, who is based in London, who is a great curator, who is doing PhD now in goldsmiths, they found her, and we have really very common interests. And so I got so happy. It could be anyone. So we started to work together with her, and we were both really interested in memory and memory reconstruction. And I was so much interested in control mechanisms. This is Nicosia. The entire island is divided into two. And in 1974, the UN came, so the green line is under the control of the UN. So, and she's also interested in commons. So I was responsible from the I'm responsible from the control mechanisms. She's responsible from the commons. Then we are both responsible from the memory. So what we did is that, of course, the UN didn't recognize me at the first sight. So I'll be exceeding my time like 5 minutes. So UN was not. They didn't recognize me for a long time. Then I found my own funding and everything from Turkey, so it was okay. Then we were collaborating with 2 institutions, but they're really artist-run spaces. Like one of them is EMMA. EMMA is European Mediterranean Art Association, and Pharos Foundation is the other one, Greek Cypriot one. Pharos is mostly based on performing arts and music. But basically, we formed a kind of independent development team. These 2 cultural managers that I was talking about, Özgül Ezgin and Argiro Tomazu, and then Pavillion, my co-curator, me, and Vicky, who was the initiator of the entire thing. So what we did is that we commissioned 8 projects as the first year. So we designed a research-based and a project that would be also establishing an archive about the airport, and which started in 2010. So in 2011, we had the works were done all through the year. Then we had the first exhibition and the panel and the book, and then we continue now with the international phase. We started with a phase that is only based on the island, because the other projects that were done, like Manifesta, and there was only 2 more projects, like big projects happened in the island. They all came from the outer world, like spaceship, and invaded there, and it didn't give. They were really good projects. I really liked them, but nobody really remembers them because they couldn't manage to make real connections with the locals. So we decided to start with the locals this time. And so we dedicated the first year to locals, so I was the only foreigner. And then we continued. But I want to show you it's really 2 minutes. Turkish melodrama is taken from Turkish melodrama. It shows exactly how it was in 1974. Turkish melodrama is the kind of adaptation and the continuation of Hollywood melodrama. I just wanted to see how it was used, because there's also part where it's about parking lot. So this is the outside of it. And Mars are using this airport because when you check the schedule, I mean every like 5 hours or something there's one flight. I'm not doing this one. That's it. So this is how it is now. I'm going to show you. And this is, as I'm saying, where all the UN officers, UN offices and units are based as well. I'll be really quick. And when you enter, there's like 2-3 centimeters, I don't know in feet or whatever, but this thick bird shit. So you can't read the first 10 minutes, but then you get used to it. But this is, I mean, this is like 12 monkeys. It's beautiful, but I'm still very obsessed with the space. And we've been to everywhere, to the basement, everything, and every time we are getting permissions from the UN to be able to do this, and every 6 months the UN's soldiers' wings, the regiment is changing, so it starts again from the scratch, how to convince them to work with the project and so forth. It's the control tower. So then during this time, apart from the projects, we also commissioned a series of posters to promote archiving. We have an archiving team from both sides, so they're collecting each and every material about the airport. So through this archive, we are knowing. I mean, we are really having a lot of information, and also the artists are using it. And some of the parts of this archive is online. Some of the parts we can't do it online because of the fact that some of them have copyright issues, but we are trying to do it. So you can see the items about it. 2 more minutes. And here's the 8 projects. Okay, what happened is that of course they let us go in, but they're not letting any civilians to get into the airport. So you need really special permissions. And so we found an abandoned building at the buffer zone. Buffer zones are the passage zones where people are passing from one checkpoint to another one to enter to both sides. And there is this one buffer zone which is like really very short distance. And there was all the buildings are there abandoned, and we found the building 37 years old. Nobody entered before. It belonged to the church, so we got permission from the church to use it. We got permission from both polices, armies, UN, whatever you can think about to use the space. So we did the first exhibition there, and the nice thing is about the fact that we were the first ones who used this building, but now Occupy, there's a movement. I really love it. I think it's my favorite Occupy movement ever. It's called Occupy Buffer Zone because it's so ironic. They're occupying a place that belongs to them, but UN is like occupying on behalf of them. So yeah, I'm sorry, I really explained the entire project in a very weird way, but it's more ordered, but it's very complicated. So one last thing I would like to say is that while we are doing this entire project, we are also somehow archiving whatever is happening on daily basis as well. So with the Arab Spring, some demonstrations started against Turkey for the first time. So it was really important, and it's very interesting because there were like a series of demonstrations, and we never had even one news item in Turkey about these demonstrations. So there's a huge, serious censorship from what's going on in Cyprus. So we can't hear this. Also, I'm not going to talk about it now, but we were also the UN censored one of the works in the exhibition. The UN censored one of the works, and they put a statement there where they censored how they censored it. But we didn't do any cheap publication out of it, publicity out of it, but we did a publication. So with the book, I refused to get any money from the UN, so we found the money from other sources. So we published the book, and in the book there's a part where we're discussing how the censorship happened and but it explains the entire control mechanisms going on in the island.
And so, going back to where I am. So this is from the demonstration, and that is from the occupied buffer zone. And yeah, thank you very much for listening.